Okay, good evening. Welcome to another edition of questions and answers about meditation, Buddhist mindfulness-based vipassana meditation for seeing clearly. So I had an idea for an experiment. And the idea was this. It might take a little bit of organizing, but I was thinking I'm connected to an audio channel on our Discord server. So if there's anyone in our community who would like to come on in voice, they could help. One thing they could do is ask some of the questions. Maybe read them off. Anyway, that might not happen tonight because it might not even work. Let me see here. Yeah, okay. Might not happen tonight because it's something I just thought of now. But if there is anyone around who knows how to get on the Discord and would like to join me in that, we could see if it would work, how it would work. Otherwise, the routine is as normal, as usual. The premise, the default, the base for this session is one of meditation. So, to start, close your eyes. Shift your state of mind into an experiential state where you relate to the universe in terms of the experiences that come to you. So seeing is seeing, hearing is hearing. And try to create that sort of objectivity where instead of interpreting and reacting to things, you just experience them as they are. And whatever they are, if they're pleasant or unpleasant, if they're wholesome or unwholesome, doesn't matter. You're like a scientist trying to understand, trying to gain knowledge, science. If you've read our booklet, you have some idea of how I'm going to explain to practice. Try and note watching the stomach rising and falling. When you experience other things, the sound of my voice, the phenomena caused by the room around you. All of them you can note. Hearing, seeing, smelling, tasting, feeling, thinking. And if and when you do have a question, you can open your eyes, type mindfully into the chat here, post your question. Try and start it with @Yuttadhammo Bhikkhu. I think it'll even auto-complete it for you. But that'll get my attention. Let me know that you got a question. If you can't do that, if that's too much trouble, don't worry about it. I'll find them. And again, if there's anyone here who is on our Discord server, they could come to the new channel I made and help ask the questions. Maybe even help answer them. ASMR. I'm not really keen on the whole ASMR thing. I mean, I don't know much about it. It's something that's sort of been creeping up without any investigation on my part. I'm hearing about this term. I don't think I actually know what it means. ASMR. I may have heard what it meant at one point. I don't know what it means. I know the general idea is that you have sounds that make you calm or peaceful, I guess, that help you go to sleep as well. And that sort of thing I don't think is in line with what we teach. So it's not actually something you should come and tell me about, thinking that we're going to have some kind of harmony there. I'm probably going to be out of harmony with you and say, not really what we're all about here. In fact, the stress and the chaos in the mind is prime object for mindfulness meditation. Being disrupted. What would be the opposite of ASMR? If I were to start making noises that upset you, would that be the opposite? If I changed my voice and made it very harsh, would that be the opposite? I don't know, but whatever that would be a very good object for meditation. Not that you should go out of your way to do that, because going out of your way to do anything is also creating habits and what we call sankharas, formations in the mind. Creating artifacts, engrams, if you know what those are. And those will have consequences. So it's not about going out of your way to be stressed or anything, but by the same token, going out of your way to try and be calm and peaceful. It's a problem that we come up against quite often, or I come up against quite often as a teacher. There's an expectation and a premise, a prejudice on people's part relating to meditation. There's an assumption, deeply held sort of default assumption that meditation should be about feeling calm. Not with everyone, and if you're familiar with vipassana and mindfulness, maybe you've gone beyond that, but it is beyond. It is beyond feeling calm. Because we can't be sure, and we can't ensure that we're always calm. And the work that we do to find calm, to be calm, is stressful, is work. No. It's work that never has an end, because when you stop that work, the stress comes back. Why does it come back? It comes back because it's beyond. It's beyond calm. And so vipassana is also beyond calm. It's deeper than that. It's more profound. I mean, it's not mysterious or anything. It's not hard to understand. It's a little hard to understand because it's hard to get your mind around the idea that you shouldn't try to be calm or happy or at peace or any of that. That actually isn't the way to be calm, happy, or peaceful. It's just a way to find a temporary fix to a much deeper problem. The true solution is to see things clearly. That's it. It's not hard to understand. It's not mysterious. It's just something. We even hear that. You might hear that, see things clearly, and just dismiss it. I get it, and you move on looking for something else. What's next? It's so simple, and it's easy to just pass it by. But that's really the point, is that we're constantly passing by this state of perfection, really, this state of perfect clarity, where we see things as they are. Because if you did see things as they were, you wouldn't need to be seeking out anything. You wouldn't need to be peaceful. You wouldn't need to be happy. There would be a much more profound peace and happiness that comes from being flexible, being unmoved, unshaken by the vicissitudes of life. You can hide from the storm, or you can learn to live with the storm. Hiding is not sustainable. So, that long way of saying that I don't think ASMR is where it's at. I think some people use it to fall asleep. That's what I was saying, that I was hearing. So people use my videos to fall asleep. And it's fine if you fall asleep listening to the Dhamma, I think. It's a little bit, maybe some could say it's a little bit disrespectful, because, I'm not looking for respect, but I could think some people would say, look, if you're going to listen to the Dhamma, you should really be serious about it. You should really take it seriously. And you shouldn't say, okay, I'll lie down and fall asleep to this, because that's lazy. It's like, suppose the Buddha were here and you were going to give a talk, and you went to see the Buddha and you say, oh, Venerable Sir, can I just bring my bed? I'm just going to lie down here and fall asleep while you teach. I mean, that might not even seem bad to people, but for many people that would seem very bad, because it's not respectful. And to some extent, that's just you could say that's just cultural or religious, but there is a point there. And it's that if you want to succeed at something, you have to take it seriously. And if you're lying down to listen to the Dhamma, it means really that you're lying down to practice the Dhamma. And of course, lying meditation is perfectly valid. But a person who practices lying meditation has to be incredibly vigilant. They wouldn't lie down to go to sleep. They would lie down and be incredibly vigilant, because it's very easy to fall asleep. Now, the point is, for some people, it's very hard to fall asleep, and so they try to use the Dhamma to help them fall asleep. Or try to use my teaching, those people who have soft voices. I guess I have a soft voice, to fall asleep. That's one side of it, is that for those people who are Buddhists and think, okay, I'm going to listen to the Dhamma where I fall asleep, it's not really the great way to listen to the Dhamma, because it's not very intent, It's lazy in a way. If you're just going to lie down and fall asleep, you're much better to maybe wait until the morning to listen, when you can pay more attention. Anyway, I don't think it's terrible. But this is different for people who actually use soft voices. So these people who are, people who are looking for a means to fall asleep. And so they find my videos or people's videos who appeal to them, who create this state of calm in them that helps them fall asleep. This is a different, so they have no interest in the Dhamma probably, or only a tangential interest, or maybe a concurrent interest. So it's both. It's a double benefit, they might think. But again, the trying to find a state of calm is often the problem, Because if you can't find that state of calm, it makes you more stressed, and that's what keeps you awake. So for people who are insomniacs, You only become an insomniac because of your stress in the mind, because of something in the mind keeping you awake. It only really becomes a problem when that's a problem for you, when staying awake is a problem for you. And you've created that for yourself. Now, two things. For people who are who need to sleep, need to go to sleep because they have to do something in the morning, there's I could say you can make an exception for such people. If you have to go to sleep, then okay, find a way to put yourself to sleep. Now, it can often be that the body is just not ready to sleep. The mind as well is just not ready to sleep, and it's not a matter of needing to sleep and not being able to sleep. It's just that there isn't the need to sleep at that moment. And so for the problem doesn't arise from the fact that you can't sleep. The problem arises from the fact that you want to sleep. And so I'm trying to describe where the stress comes from. Because the stress comes from when you start thinking to yourself, I have to sleep. It comes from counting hours and thinking, I have to get up at a certain time, and if I don't sleep now. And so the seed gets planted, and it becomes habitual, where anytime you can't sleep at the time when you think you should be sleeping. And that relates to people who have to get up and do things in the morning when their body and their mind are not amenable or not cooperating. They cultivate this habit, and it becomes to the point where their attempts to fall asleep are what keep them awake. So the mind and the body might have been ready to sleep and might have been actually quite tired because they're insomniac. But they've developed this stress, and this stress, of course, affects the body, it affects the mind, and it wakes the body and the mind up. I had that happen to me. I was insomniac for some time in high school. Up until 3 a.m. shouting at myself, you gotta sleep, you gotta sleep. It's really the wrong way to go about it. So the only thing I really wanted to say, a long roundabout way of saying that, letting go of the need to sleep, the need to be calm, the need for all of this is often what makes you more calm, sleep better, and just be more at peace in general, happier in general. And that's just a general principle in mindfulness, is not trying to have certain experiences, this tingling feeling or calm feeling or anything like that. Any seeking out of any of that is still seeking. And seeking is habit forming. It becomes a pattern of behavior where you seek it out. When you don't get what you seek, you're not at peace. So all y'all ASMR people, I think you have to reconsider a little bit that you might be getting addicted. I don't really know too much about it, but that's my sense. All right, we have questions. Looks like we have a bunch. And nobody's joined the Discord server. If you're just joining us, oh, Fernando's here. Fernando, can you make noise?
Hi, Bhante. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I wonder if the channel can hear you. Just a second. Can anybody hear Fernando? Go ahead, say something again.
Hi.
Yeah,
I can
okay,
hear channel because it creates like a reverberating sound, but I don't
Well,
know.
you can mute the video. You don't need to have the video on because you can hear me through Discord. Then it'll be more in sync with me. Don't listen to the video.
Okay, Bhante.
Just listen to Discord. All right. You want to read me some questions? Actually, I have to post them, I think, anyway, so I don't know if that works. Let's... All right, our first question. Do you see it?
Yes.
All right. You can be my asker then. You can also comment if you have answers or if you have questions. You're welcome to talk.
Okay, thank you. So the first one. Hello, Bhante. How one sees non-self when doing walking meditation?
Okay. Questions like this, questions about the three characteristics. You have to understand, because we approach meditation like we approach most things in life, trying to understand them, trying to wrap our heads around them, get a sense of the meaning, and try to attain the state where we understand things. So, I mean, this is a good question. It's a good question, but we have to. The answer has to be clarified with the fact that what it means to see non-self is actually something very simple, and it's again so simple that we often miss it. We often go right by it. So, when we talk about the three characteristics, the first thing to note is that they're in contrast to their opposites, right? Because what are the three characteristics for? What are they? What's the significance of them? They are what causes the mind to let go. They are what frees the mind from clinging. Why is that the case? Because our reasons for clinging our clinging is based on misunderstanding. Our clinging is based on a misperception that the things that we cling to are going to bring us happiness, right? Are going to bring some benefit if we cling to them, through clinging to them. We may not have that intellectual idea, but that's the premise. That's the sort of base mind state when we engage in clinging. There's a sense or a misperception, a delusion that they're going to make us happy. And there are three qualities to that. One, that they are stable, the perception that things are stable. Two, that things are satisfying. And three, that things are controllable or possessible, are any, and this is related to self, right? Anything related to self. Our relationship with reality as based on a perception of self, many different kinds. And those are all wrong. And that's what you start to see. Or that way of looking at things is wrong. It's not it's not in line with reality. It's not in tune with what the eventualities are going to come. It's out of sync. It's out of touch. It's dangerous. Because when things are unstable, which they are, we suffer. When things change, we're not ready because of our conception of things being stable. Satisfying, we cling to things, and then when they don't satisfy us, or when we can't get what we want, we're dissatisfied. Perceiving things as satisfying is improper, because they're not, because they're arising and ceasing. There's no satisfaction that comes from anything. It's not the way happiness is found. And control, trying to control, really, if things are unstable, there's something inherent there that's not under our control. If they're unsatisfying, there's no possessing them. There's no reason for possessing them. There's no benefit to possessing them. And in fact, possession is just an illusion. reality happens. So when you talk about seeing non-self, it really means seeing the wrongness of self, seeing the incorrect assumption of self, seeing how the things that you thought were me, mine, under my control are not. There's no accuracy, there's no reality involved with that assumption or that perception. It's out of touch with reality. So how would you see it? That's not really answering the question. To then, based on that, answer the question. How would you see it? You would see things like, simple things like the foot moving by itself, you would see things like the stomach when the rise and the fall is a very common one. When the stomach rises and falls, there's a perception of controlling it to rise, controlling it to fall, and a great stress that comes from that. So you because you're trying to control, and it's not smooth like you expect it. You okay, I'll make it rise, good, that'll be smooth, I'll make it fall. You don't even have to say it, it's just your habit to try and control it, and it's not working. You're starting to see that, actually, what's wrong here? Trying to control it is not bringing the results I expected. It's not smooth and comfortable, right? And we don't get that at first. You think, I'm trying to control it and that's causing stress. How would that be possible? If you could actually control it, how would controlling it bring stress? You see? But everyone will report this, or many, many people will report this. I was controlling the breath and that made it stressful. How wrong is that? How wrong is that? If you were actually controlling it, there would be no stress. We don't get that, and that's what you're starting to see. You don't realize it, but you're starting to see. Many people describe it as self, actually. I'm controlling the breath. You're not. If you were controlling it, it would be absolutely perfect. It would be the perfect breath. But because it's not perfect, you're not controlling it at all. But the perception of control. And so you start to let go of the perception of control, the perception of possession. The stomach starts to go by itself, and when you really experience that, it means you've become in tune with it, and it's so peaceful, and it's so free from any clinging. That experience is enough. If it gets to that level, that is enough to create the experience of cessation, where the mind lets go of everything. My voice is very calming and relaxing. Well, that's not a bad thing to have a calm and relaxing voice, but it's problematic if you like that, you have to say liking, and if it's calming, you have to say calm, calm. And if you seek it out just for that, it can be addictive. All right. You see it?
Yeah. Yes, Bhante. I think there is another one
There's
before.
somebody else? Oh, no. Another one? Well, I may not be... Oh, yes, you're right. I may not answer that, but I think you're right. All right. The one I missed.
Yeah. What is the end, the telos of our meditation? Or is it incorrect to think in terms of ends when we meditate?
What do you think, Fernando?
Uh,
Are we back? You still here?
Welcome back, Bhante.
Thank you. Our internet, well, I reset the router and that did it, so I guess it's a router problem.
Oh,
So I don't know what y'all heard last, but, oh, we're at an old one, aren't we? Have to go to the new question. Here we are. Okay. So yeah, when you meditate, it's incorrect to think in terms of ends. I mean, it should be a part of your practice to note that. To note the desire for an outcome, the worry about an outcome, the doubt about an outcome. All of those are going to be hindrances. And this is really one of the best, simplest ways to understand what it means to be in the present moment, is to understand it in terms of not having any goal. So there is a goal, for sure. Absolutely there's a goal. And Buddha talked about goals and was very big on talking about goals, but he was also big on letting go, and that the goal is really about letting go. And so in a sense, it's not a future goal, it's a present goal. Our goal is to be closer to the present, in a way. Or our goal is to have fewer goals, you could say. Perhaps to have no goals ultimately. Which is a goal, right? It's a goal, but if you're going to have that goal, you have to let go of goals. You have to let go of thinking relating to goals entirely. So it can't be about goals. If you want to be pure, purity is, a part of being pure is not being fixated on results. And in fact, that should be a sort of a theme in regards to, doing good deeds and so on. The best way is, the Buddha said, it's just do them for the mind. Do them because it's good for the mind. Not because of any result that might come. There's something profound about that, in the sense that there's no need to focus on results if you're doing the right thing, right? We often have a fairly contrived way of looking at what is right. And we say it's right, but what we're used to hearing that is because someone says it's right, because God said it was right, so on. Because it's what other people want you to do, it's what looks good, that sort of thing. But no, if something is right, it really has to lead to good results. And so why would you ever worry about the end result? Why would you ever worry about the result of your deeds? So if you get that sort of philosophy, that sort of outlook, you can focus entirely on what you're doing. I think the question in response to that is often, well, how do you know you're doing the right thing if you don't look at what it brings, the result it brings? And so, yes, I guess to some extent you can see. And practically speaking, of course, everyone sees what the meditation does for them, and that gives them confidence. But on a much deeper level, how do you know something is right? That's a very difficult question for people, because until you become mindful, you've never really done what's right. You've never really been in a state that we would consider perfectly right, and so it's something very foreign. How would you know it? And I would say you will know it. That the thing about being right, doing right, thinking right, having a right mind, is that it involves such perfect clarity that you will know that you're doing the right thing. that you're saying the right thing, that you're thinking, that your thoughts are right. There's such a clarity of mind. And the part of the rightness is the perception of what is right and wrong, right? What I mean to say is that there's such a quality to the mind that you have no doubt that it's right. Part of that is the perfect confidence, right? Because if you didn't have perfect confidence, there would be something wrong with it, you could say. And this is a very lofty way of describing mindfulness, and it's a very simple state, but it's also very profound. And so the best goal in meditation is to learn and to become more familiar with mindfulness, states of mindfulness, because the more familiar you are with them, the less doubt you have when you see how pure and perfect and clear they are. You don't have to focus on results, even though you will see. Practically, of course, everyone's going to see as they practice what it does to them. But that won't be the deepest, most profound source of your confidence in that what you're doing is right. I hope that was sort of answering your question. Still online? Okay. Still with me, Fernando?
Yes, Bhante.
Go ahead.
Is there a certain time period after which someone should experience results from their meditation? After a year of daily correct practice without results, what to do?
Every time you sit down for meditation, you should learn something. I stand by that. I once said that many, many years ago. I said that to a monk friend of mine in Chiang Mai, and he was shocked by that. He said, well, every time I do a retreat, I learn something, but every time I sit, I stand by it. It's not that you will, maybe you don't, but that's a sign. Every time you sit. Ultimately, any moment of mindfulness should be a moment of improvement. And so there may be some stepping back and reflecting on what you mean by results and how actually you're practicing, and maybe find a teacher to help guide you to better sort of quality of meditation. But I think often this sort of sentiment is overlooking what you're actually getting from it, and because you overlook it and you're looking for something else, it will actually, that in and of itself will diminish the results because of your lack of because of your dissonance with those results. You're not focused on them, and what I mean is the results you're looking for may not be the results that you should be looking for. So maybe the answer to the last question will help you to realign what you're looking for, to maybe stop looking so much. On the other hand, you could be practicing wrong. That happens. It's less common, but it happens. Usually what happens, people practice properly, the results they get aren't the results they're looking for, so they overlook them, and as a result, those results are not as powerful as they would be if you were clear that that's the direction you should be going, you see. It's like if you're traveling and you take an exit, you're in the car and you take an exit, it's the right exit, but before you found it, you were wondering, where's the right exit? And so you were going slow and you were looking, and then you take the right exit, and you don't know it's the right exit, and so you're still going slow, and because you didn't realize you took the right exit. That's sort of what it's like. All right, I think we'll go for this one.
Hello. I can hear tones when I meditate. I also notice the tone changes when I concentrate on different chakra organ, but it's heard by my brain since when I try to listen with my ears. Do you have any experience with this?
Right, so we're going to put aside the last part of it. Let's just talk about the the content of this. It's not really relevant whether I have any experience with it. What's important is that we understand what's going on here. Hearing tones is, of course, a very basic object of meditation. It's called hearing, right? It's very simple. When you hear things, you would say to yourself, hearing, hearing. Doesn't matter whether it's something outside or in your mind, it doesn't matter. Concentrating on different chakras, organs, well, that has nothing to do with the meditation that I teach. So I'd recommend, if you're interested in what I have to teach, that you read our booklet on how to meditate. Try and take up that meditation practice. So concentrating on anything like that is not how we practice. When things change, well, yeah, they change because they're impermanent. So we would note new experience as well. It being heard by your brain, it's not the greatest English, the greatest grammar. I mean, I'm not really quite clear what you're trying to say. It's heard by my brain since when I try to listen with my ears. That whole statement, I don't quite understand what it means, but I get the content of that statement is just your perception of it, your conception of it. And that's something you can safely discard, what you think of it, where it comes from, brain, mind, whatever. Hearing is just hearing. That's what you need to focus on. When you don't answer my questions, I get angry. I try to be mindful, then I get angry at myself because I get angry. I don't want bad karma and I want to say sorry. Well, saying sorry is always good. You apologize to me, I should apologize to you. If I have done anything wrong to you, I'm sorry as well. That's the Buddhist way. People commenting on ASMR, the ASMR thing. I'm going to lose my ASMR following. Or maybe it will help some of them to gain a perspective that I would think is a bit, goes beyond whatever ASMR might bring. All right, here's one on alcohol.
Living with others who are addicted to alcohol is impacting my practice. I'm aware I should not disliking anger, but is there not an ethical need to intervene? Practice, practice requires ethics.
Okay, so ethics on that topic, it doesn't quite answer your question yet, but let's just make clear that Buddhist ethics, so that you can't use that as an excuse, Buddhist ethics involves non-action. I think, let me see. Can I say that clearly? I suppose that's not quite fair. Okay, there are some actions that are ethical, but by and large, the ethics are the things that you don't do. The practice is what you do. So, I mean, that it's not quite so cut and dried, but it almost is. And for the most part, we can practically understand it that way. Things that we shouldn't do and things that we should do. And the things that we shouldn't do, well, that's the ethics side of it. The things that we should do are not, we wouldn't really think of them as ethical in the sense. So this idea of an ethical imperative and a moral imperative or whatever, you have to do this, you have to do that, saving people or if someone needs your help or so on. I think generally speaking, at least I can say that we're less inclined to those sorts of states, those sorts of views, those sorts of perspectives. So a Buddhist might very well watch people suffering without intervening, you know. I just hypothetically. Now, having said that, I had a long conversation with one of my meditators yesterday, I think, about it. We had 2 meditators still here. They're stuck with me. They're not sick of me yet, I don't think, but we're actually living quite in harmony. It's quite a good living situation. They're feeding me, so I'm very appreciative. But she had this pretty much this same sort of question. Well, it was a bit different, but it was the same idea. You know, shouldn't you do something, for example? And the point of why you shouldn't think of it that way anyway is because reality is reality, which really tells you nothing. It's a pretty poor statement, but I want to start off there because the way you approach experience, let's say we approach situations as Buddhists, is as experiences. So you're experiencing the thing that everyone else is calling a problem. You know, someone who is addicted to alcohol, people would see as a problem, as a thing, really. And it's not a thing. From a Buddhist perspective, the way we approach it is not as a thing. We approach it as experiences. And so the results, the resulting actions of that approach might sometimes seem quite strange. Even they might say selfish, no, they would say lacking compassion, right? What's the opposite of compassionate? Cruel, heartless, cold. But the point is that all of that is conception. You know, they conceive of it that way. They perceive it that way. There's an extrapolation. Their experience is of you doing what you're doing. Right? And I'm thinking now, if I say to you, no, you don't have to, I'm not saying this, but suppose I were to say to you, you don't have to intervene, let them be alcoholics, that sort of thing. I'm not telling you to do that, but suppose I did, and I don't saying that's what Buddhists say, but suppose I did, then someone else would perceive you doing that, and they might get angry, you know, or they might blame you or scold you or that sort of thing. And so that's on them. That's their reaction to their experience of you doing whatever it is you're going to do, right? So what I mean is, that's all it is. There's no rightness to them just because they say you should have done this, you should have done that. And that's ultimately the conclusion of what I was saying to this person, our meditator here, is that the whole should, you should do this, you're using this word, need, ethical need, you need to do this. Yeah. It's all meaningless. And I would say it often comes back to our cultural, cultural preconception or prejudice, or what is this word? Where we come from. And that is usually from a theistic or deistic, at least, perception where there are gods or God or you know, people in authority who make rules. You know? So we have this idea of should. Buddhism doesn't have such an idea. We just have an idea of results, causes and effect. So if you are cold and heartless towards people, it's not wrong per se. I mean, it's not like you should have done something else. It's just that if you do that, and this is the Buddha again and again, you look at his language, it's so clear, and it just lights up this fact. And if you read the Buddha's teaching, it makes it so clear the way the Buddha perceived things. If you do this, that will happen. If you do that, this will happen. That sort of thing. A person does this and that happens. A person does that and this happens. And that's all he had to say about it. You know? He kind of let it be, let it make itself known. what was the right and the wrong thing to do. Because he would relate things in terms of happiness and suffering, and he didn't really even say, you should want to be happy, you should try and avoid the suffering things. He just pointed it out to people without even telling them what to do. Because that's the way a Buddhist looks at the world. You don't even tell other people, look, you should give up suffering. It's just more often it was more like, if you do that, suffering will come. And let you decide. And that's why the Buddha framed everything in terms of happiness and suffering, I think. That's because it was objective. An objective that you could say, don't do that. Why would you do that? Because it's suffering. That causes suffering. There's no need to tell you not to do or should do. So, very simply, when a Buddhist approaches these sorts of experiences, there's no need to ask, what should you do? Because the state of your mind and the quality of your mindfulness is going to determine what you do. It's going to color and create reactions, interventions, and so on. Rather than, this kind of question like, what would Jesus do? So what would the Buddha do? That sort of thing. Rather than asking those sorts of things, do what you do. Do what you would do as a person, but try your best to cultivate mindfulness, because as you cultivate mindfulness, what you would do will change. So this is a very simple example. It's a very good example. If someone is addicted to alcohol, you want to help them. That's who you are. Probably you want to help them. And you think to yourself, I should intervene and that sort of thing. So whatever that is, apply mindfulness to it. Apply mindfulness to your reactions, to your experiences of them, that sort of thing. There's no answer. I can't say to you, do this and all your problems will be resolved, obviously, right? But that's kind of, anytime we look for a solution, we're kind of doing that. We're kind of looking for a shortcut. And the way is not that. The way is to refine and purify. You see, so like Fernando said, we're trying to purify the mind. This is what the meaning of purify is. It's not to suddenly change what you do. It's to take your doings and thinkings and sayings, your experiences and your actions, and purify them, refine them. And you refine them through mindfulness, through clarity, through seeing things as they are. So, I feel like sometimes I don't actually give an answer to the question, but hopefully what I give is helpful. All right. Did I skip one? No. Okay.
Is focusing on your insecurities essential to meditating?
Not really. I mean, yes and no. The words are so hard because because I want to point out some potential problems with this question. I mean, it's a good question, but the way it's phrased, there's potential for understanding it in different ways. Like, should you focus on anything? Yes, depending on what you mean by that. But let me give you an example. If someone were to obsess about their insecurities, and that happens, right? Should you focus on them? Well, does that mean you're obsessing about them? You're constantly looking for them and trying to ferret them out and root them out and looking for them and so on? Trying to dig deeper, delve, for example? That's not what we do. So, so rather than focus on your insecurities, right? Because when we say that in English, it means usually it implies at the sort of at the expense of other things you might be focusing on, and that's not what we want to do. We want to focus. It's essential, let's say this, it's essential to focus on the present experience, the experiences that have just arisen. When an experience arises, the next thing you should do is remind yourself that it is what it is. That's what mindfulness means. It means to remind yourself. Sati means to remember, to remind yourself. Just remember it for what it is, rather than forget and get lost and get caught up in your reactions and so on. So if your insecurities come up, and again, let's look at that part of the statement, because the question, because your insecurities, again, there's the your, which, it's just conventional. We use that. But insecurities, I'm actually more interested in. Using the word insecurities turns them into a thing, right? And insecurities are things, but things don't exist. So insecurities don't actually exist. What exists are patterns of behavior. Patterns themselves don't exist, but you can see patterns. The behaviors, the mental qualities, they arise, they exist, and they arise in patterns based on habits. And that's all insecurities are. Insecurities aren't a thing. There are going to be habits of reacting to certain experiences, habits of thinking certain things and having certain experiences and that sort of thing. Even our experiences arise in patterns. You can jump in any time if you have anything to say or ask, Fernando. It's nice to have someone else here.
Okay, Bhante.
Fernando's a long time volunteer and member of our community. Some of you probably know him. He's also a moderator, so he can put people on timeout. We're not going to get... Sorry, go ahead.
I just was saying that when it's necessary, I will.
Thank you. It's not necessary. We got a good community. It's great. For YouTube, that's great, because I hear bad thing. People, there can be problems on YouTube. It's just so open. But we have a really good group, I think, for the most part. Maybe it's because they can't see my face. Nobody wants to. If you're not really into it, if your eyes are open, everyone's eyes should be closed, you see. You shouldn't have Facebook open. You shouldn't be doing other things. Don't even have to read the questions, because we got someone reading them and we got someone answering them. I should post these early so you have a chance to see them. I'll post them and then I'll start talking. Okay, go ahead. You see it?
Yes. Mind states often arise and disappear very rapidly. They are too fast to all note accurately without rushing. How to deal with this?
You don't have to note everything. Just note whatever is most prevalent, something. It's not magic. It's not like if you catch every single one, you're going to become enlightened. That's not how it works. In fact, the practice is artificial. A lot of people comment this, but meditation practice is artificial. It's not the actual results that we're looking for. The purity, the clarity is what comes as a result of the practice. So you're trying to evoke mindfulness, really. You're trying to evoke states of clarity and purity. But you evoke them by reminding yourself, hey, no, it's not me, mine, good, bad, this, that, the other thing. It is what it is. That's all you're trying to do. Think of it that way. Because it's not magic and it's not some pill that you can just take. You have to actually be doing it. You have to be mindful. So use it like that. Use it as a means to really change your state of mind. And you don't have to note everything, just whatever, something, whatever's clearest. And be regular and methodical about it, that's all.
Next question. I have been wondering for a while about how necessary is meditation if you have this sort of meditative way of thinking in general. like being open to the contents of the unconscious all the time.
Yeah, I've heard this from various people over the years. There's no need to meditate. It's not necessary to meditate. But if the question were, will you get the same results from, and this is basically what you're asking, will you get the same results from what you're describing, being open to the contents of consciousness all the time, as you will from practicing the meditation that I teach in that booklet, for example? It really depends what you mean by being open to the contents of the unconscious all the time. So, what is the unconscious? I guess you're referring to thoughts that haven't arisen and that sort of thing, so that when they do arise, you're open to them, because that sort of describes enlightenment. The only real reason for practicing meditation is because you're not open, because you have greed, you have anger, you have delusion. If you don't have any of those, there's no need to meditate. It means you're enlightened. So, if you're not enlightened, just saying to yourself, and this is more common, I think, than people actually being enlightened, is people saying, I won't meditate. I will just be open to the contents of the unconscious all the time. Or, that's not how I would put it, but something like that. That's really not, I think, the most ideal road to take, because you're not going to get as far as you might think. It's not such a simple thing where you can just say, I'm going to do this, and it suddenly happens that you're open and not reactionary or reactive. You often will rather end up suppressing and entering into states of calm that are a means of avoiding unpleasant experiences, which are okay, but they're temporary and they don't actually solve the problem. Mindfulness goes deeper, and in fact it shows you unwholesomeness is in the mind, defilement in the mind that you didn't even know existed. You weren't even aware of because you weren't paying enough attention. A lot of people have this idea that mindfulness is you can just live a meditative life. Absolutely. Try it. And if you still get angry, greedy, or deluded, then, well, you're not enlightened. Because that, and that won't get rid of, doing that isn't the means of getting rid of them. I mean, meditation isn't some special thing. It is specifically the practice of getting rid of greed, anger, and delusion, and seeing things more clearly. That's all it is. So any practice that is that is the same as what we're doing. We'll go a little over time. We got lots of questions. I'm not going to get caught up. You're going to have to save your questions for next time, but I'll try to get a little caught up here. I'll stay a little longer because we lost some time there.
Next question. I was wondering if it is possible for a sociopath or someone with antisocial personality disorder to have peace, equilibrium?
I almost don't want to answer this one because it's speculative. I was wondering, but it may be that this person is concerned for someone, or that's just a way of phrasing it, right? And because that kind of it's kind of a speculative sort of question. Is it possible for this or that to happen? I mean, often I don't know what's possible. I can only tell you my experience and what I've read and that sort of thing. There's different ways I can answer it. And because you're using lots of words like sociopath, what exactly is the meaning of sociopath? It's just a term that people use they apply to different people. What exactly are you referring to? Someone with a disorder, again, it's just a label that people put because they recognize certain qualities, characteristics in a person based on a book, a manual, that sort of thing. what do you mean by peace and equilibrium? That's not how I would phrase things. Is that really what we're referring to? Sounds good. It's probably very close, but it can mean different things to different people. So let's be a little more general. Let's talk about what does it mean to be a sociopath and the antisocial personality disorder, and then talk about peace and equilibrium. So a sociopath is someone, I think their salient characteristic is they don't have compassion for others. And to some extent, you don't need compassion. I mean, it's just that the way we think of compassion is often over the top. Again, like you have to feel certain things for people, or you have to go out of your way to empathize, or that sort of thing. Some people just won't have that, or sometimes you just won't have that, right? Someone says something and by gosh, if you don't give rise to a sense of feeling bad for them, then you're cruel and cold-hearted. Well, the brain and the mind are organic. How do you know it's going to arise at the right time? Maybe just because of brain chemistry, you just don't give rise. It just doesn't trigger. It's not always going to trigger the way it should, even in people who are not labeled as sociopaths. So to some extent, it's not a problem. It's just that when you are cruel, and you have no problem hurting other people, there's something very, very wrong with the mind at that point, I would say. I think some people would say it's organic, it's just the brain. I don't know. I think if the brain is not giving you the right chemicals, that could be a contributing factor. But if you're in a state where you don't realize that it's wrong to hurt others, you know that you're hurting others and it just doesn't bother you and that sort of thing, that I would say is a very, very bad state. And it's not going to lead to happiness at all. It's going to lead someone to very intense states of suffering. I mean, I think you could argue that there are sorts of people who don't have, again, I think we're speculating, but people who don't actually know that they're harming others, right? They don't have a sense of it causing harm to others. That could be the case. I think I'm just going to stop there because it's a bit speculative. Okay, let's maybe skip some. I know that's not popular, but see if we can get to some that are all right, we have to do this one. I'm going to skip some though, so you can't go in order, Fernando. Just go by what I'm posting.
Okay. When nothing becomes automatic and there is not really awareness anymore, what should I do? It's almost as if the noting became verbal.
Well, the noting is kind of verbal, even though it's in the mind. That's not the problem. But when it's automatic in the sense that you're not really aware, then you should note that, like something like knowing that, the awareness of that. If there's feelings associated with it, that sort of thing, you should note the feeling. That's all. Just, note that anomalous state and try to get back to a state where you're actually aware of the experience.
In walking meditation, while trying to focus on the experiences at the moving foot, I still feel sensation at the standing foot. Is that proper? Or should my awareness exclude the standing foot?
No, it's not. You're not trying to control the awareness. So there's many things you'll experience, but that doesn't mean you have to note them. Just try and note the foot that's moving. That's all. Even though you're aware of other things. And then we have all this. Everyone's conscientious. Appreciate you all for being thoughtful when we lost connection. It was a part of the Dhamma, no? Impermanence, uncertainty, unpredictable. Any reactions you might have had, that's where you should try and work. All right. Sometimes I skip good questions. I'm sorry. I'm trying not to skip good questions. And just because I skipped it doesn't mean it's a bad question, but it's only a bad question from my perspective in the sense that it doesn't fit the context. Not that it's a bad question, like you're a bad person for asking it. That's not it at all. But I'm not going to answer all of them. All right. I think this one we can do.
What should you do when your meditation practice starts negatively impacting your work? Mindfulness is a state of mind in which I don't appear to be as productive.
Mm-hmm. Well, the ultimate answer is quit your work, become a monk, go and live in the forest, meditate all the time. That's ultimately what it's going to come down to. It's like meditation practice in this way, and I don't want to scare anyone, but it's kind of like if this proverbial thread, you find a loose thread on your woolen on your wool sweater, and so you pull it, and you think you'll just get rid of this thread, right? Yeah, but as you pull, the thread gets longer, and the sweater gets shorter, until in the end you have no sweater. That's kind of what it's like. But that makes it sound kind of scary, but it's actually more like you start off seeing problems, and as you deal with those problems, your awareness becomes more acute, right? And so you notice more subtle problems. And there's really there's no place to stop where you can say, okay, that's enough, I can stop now. Because you just keep seeing more and more and more until there's none left. So it's always going to be a little bit of a conflict. Now, of course, the response, of course, is that, well, I need to work to survive and I can't become a monk and so on. But so all it means is there's going to be this struggle. There's going to be this conflict. You're going to start to say to yourself, I don't need to be as productive or as successful in my work, but I need to be productive and successful to some extent, or else I'm going to lose my job, etc. But you may not be worried about promotions or good jobs or that sort of thing. You'll start to incline towards jobs that are conducive towards meditation and allow you to be mindful more, that sort of thing. It's not easy. There's a conflict. It's kind of we're at war to some extent with our defilements, but I guess you could also say with the world. There's always going to be this conflict. Just when I think we're at the bottom, then it suddenly skips and there's a whole bunch more. This is in response. I'm just going to reply to someone saying, so expect to learn something every time we meditate. Yeah, no, you shouldn't expect. I may have been wrong to say it that way because it puts expectations on people, but I really do think that if you are meditating properly, you will. I think the reason for saying it and why it can be a good thing to say is because it helps put in perspective. It does up the ante to some extent, rather than thinking, oh, I'm meditating like a cow, like an ox, plodding forward, and maybe sometime in the future I'll become enlightened. You see how wrong that is? If you're not actually learning here and now, you're not meditating. So I think I stand by it. And I think it challenges you to actually up the quality of your meditation. Everyone's going to be worried about this. What the heck is he saying? I haven't been learning something every time. You won't necessarily, but it's because sometimes you walk and sit and you're actually not really very meditative. Well, we meditate wrong a lot. So I've thrown down the gauntlet. Okay, here's one. I think we're almost at the bottom.
Everything reminds me of that. When I see the feeling of my heart, body, sending, bring so much fear, I feel as though I'm waiting for the executioner to strike. Is this it? Am I used to sit with it?
So something reminding you of something else is it's a good observation. Things remind you of this. I think it's probably hyperbole to say that everything reminds you of death. You're probably reminded of death by many things, you might say, not everything. I would be quite skeptical that that's the case. But the fact that you are reminded of death by many things is just a fact of life. I mean, it's a fact of your life, a fact of your reality. It's something you should be mindful of. It doesn't mean anything. It's just, maybe that's the way it is right now. It's also not permanent, so it will change. But when you notice that something reminds you of death, you can say knowing or thinking or that sort of thing. When the feeling of your heart arises, that often instigates fear. So you should note the feeling of your heart, feeling, and then you see, because when your heart starts beating, you say, "Oh my gosh, I'm so afraid," and so you build the fear, right? And of course, when you're afraid, you should say afraid. That's really all there is to it. That's all. That's it. You don't sit with it. You observe it, create clarity about it. Not observe it. Observe is the wrong word. You remind yourself it is what it is. Use the technique. Read my booklet if you haven't. All right. Some questions. I'm sure you probably people are not very happy that I'm not answering their questions, saying, "What's wrong with my question? That was a good question, wasn't it?" Yes, yes, they're good. You have good questions. They're just not my kind of question. Not in this format. And it's been an hour and a half. So that's all for tonight. Thank you all for coming out. You're a really good group. Again, I appreciate you all, and that people are coming out to listen to this is a great thing. So, I mean, that's kind of self-aggrandizing, but I'm appreciative that people are interested in the Dhamma and interested in the same things that I'm interested in. So I wish you all progress. I wish you all to gain something every time you sit down, every time you do walking, every time you do sitting, to learn something about yourself. I wish for you all to find peace, happiness, and freedom from suffering. Have a good night.
Thank you, Ante.
Thank you,
Sadhu.
Fernando. Have a good night.
Sadhu.